So then, we are back with the more understandings from the Renewed Covenant from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Israel, from the prophets of old. During time, Israel then was obedient and at times disobedient. The prophets then always pointed the people back to the instructions. And then, the Messiah, when he came, he also pointed the people back to the instructions, while then transitioning the people from the first service to the second service. So then, many people ask, what would be then the consequences if a person then does not come to the Messiah? There are very many areas you can speak of. However, you find then in Luke, when the Messiah speaks then of the inferno, and the souls then dying without the Messiah, and where they are maintained at, where they are kept. So then, for those who have some sort of Savior understanding, then they can relate with it, because in terms of a person, when a person dies, it's not going to heaven. The situation is, they did not understand the layers of the prophetic, neither they don't understand the renewed covenant. A person does not go to heaven, but a person then ceases from then the perils of this world and sin's temptations. In other words, when you die in the Messiah, simply you are going to rest. Your soul then, that has the characters of yourself when you were in a living body, your soul goes to rest. It's very simple, because Yaakov explains it as James, but doesn't exist. The name is Yaakov, the brother of the Messiah. So then, what was then the Messiah trying to say to his people when he was then given the understanding of Lazarus and what went on during his lifetime? And then also we understand what went on with the rich person when they were then confronted with what would be coming in the near future if they did not receive the Messiah. Because the Messiah was very smart. He was then giving parables, so then the people, based upon what they thought was important, would excuse themselves without the Messiah having to point the problems. Because the intention of the person then would filter them out of the junk, or they would excuse themselves. So then the Messiah was concerned with the people. So then he gives an understanding of then Lazarus. And there was a certain person whose name was Lazarus, and he would lay at the gate of the rich person, while being then with many sores. And he was longing then of course to be fed, and he did with the crumbs that went out of the table of the rich person. Even the dogs would come and then would lick his sores. So the situation was very detrimental. Then it had taken place that the unfortunate person then died, and the angels had taken him to the bosom of Abraham. So simply understanding is, he was then loyal, though the lifetime of his time in the earth was harsh. His soul went to rest. When you hear went to Abraham's bosom, you hear then simply the soul resting. Because then, when you understand what Yahweh said to his people, then he said, then your self is going to be resting with your forefathers. Is what it meant. It's very simple. Also then the rich man died and was buried. And while he was then in torment, that's when you have to understand what the Messiah meant as far as being part of the first death. And you find these then in Revelation, or then the autumn feast. Then you have to have a reading also in Ecclesiastes. Then you understand what these means. When then Shimon in a renewed covenant related with this topic in Luke, and also what the Messiah said in autumn feast, you find then Shimon speaking of the same topic from the 7th through the 9th verses. Shimon had a problem at the time because the nations, they were not being obedient. And he requested then vengeance to come upon them. However, Yahweh came as the vindicator. However, then he changed it to Abba. He was fathering then Shimon. Yahweh said it wasn't for him to be asking for this because it was reserved for the time of the end. And he explains those souls that were disobedient, and then they would be then in a place where then in the second death they would have been done away with. So you have to understand the layers of each of those. So when you then begin to read, then the rich person then was found in Sheol. Sheol is the first death. That's where the people, they are stored, their souls, tormented souls, are stored until the earth then is burning. When the Messiah shows up, comes the shout of sulfur, and then the earth burns as with a fervent heat, as spoken of by Shimon. Then the chamber of death, of the first death, where those people are then tormented, is going to be thrown in the earth while burning, along with the evil spirits and the whole cohort, and then sin is eliminated. So then he began to read. He lifted up his eyes and gazed from afar upon Abraham and upon Lazar at his bosom. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, Father Abraham, please have mercy on me, and send Lazar that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and to moisten my tongue for me. For behold, myself obviously in torment. So then he gives us an understanding of what the Messiah then is giving us as a warning of those who continue without him. However, he is speaking these for his own people, primarily because the promises were then for the set apart. Gentiles, they don't have this same level of intimacy because they are not the set apart. However, when we are saved, we are then part of the Messiah. Works both, but then they have distinct categories. For behold, he was tormented in these flames. So the Messiah is not saying the kingdom of heaven is like or any other area. He is saying this is an actual area where people are then stored. The souls of the people are stored and they are in torment. If people, they die without the Messiah, without a proper understanding of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, during the lifetime while they can learn, then their soul is going to be in torment until the closing of the age. After then the Messiah rescue his people, then is going to come a shout of sulfur as per then the prophecy and what Shimon had said. Then this chamber of souls being tormented is thrown in the earth while burning. Then you have the first death thrown in the second death. So then you hear words that the Messiah spoke to his people to set apart, and then they had to make a decision because they were being transitioned, and the Messiah was giving them what would cause their rejection of him, as compared with Lazar and Abraham, and also the rich person. Then the Messiah continues, and he was then giving other directives related with himself as transitioning the people from the first service and the second service. So then we can understand it's an actual place where souls are stored, tormented until the time of the end. Please stay tuned.